What's up, everybody? This is the Tied to the Land podcast, where we believe that everybody is tied to the land in some way, shape, or form. On this podcast, we'll explore the intimate connection that people feel with the land beneath their feet, while telling the stories of folks whose lives have been impacted by their roots to the rural lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Arrowhead Land Company, where their mission is to create, inspire, or advance a connection to the land in every person throughout the world. What's going on, guys? Long time no see. This is the Tied to the Land podcast. My name is Andrew Schultz. And to start off this podcast for the year, we brought in my lovely wife, Julia. Hey, baby.
Hey.
So we've taken a little bit of a sabbatical from the podcast. Hasn't been intentional, just with a growing business. There's other demands and other needs that need met. And so we're back. And we are going to try to bring you guys some more value and some more exciting things, and we promise we're going to try harder to stick to it this year. We had a lot of people asking us, what happened to the podcast? Where you guys been? Did you run out of things to talk about? As business grows, there's just other needs that need to be met. So anyways, here we are. Happy to be back into it. Happy New Year to everybody. We're in February now, but it's still kind of the new year, and we are excited to talk to you about some of our recent excursions that we've been on. We went on a cow elk hunt, similar to a story that y'all probably heard previously on the podcast, but this time was a little different. And it's different because we brought our 2-month-old newborn baby girl. And that's a little different from the last go around that we told y'all about. I've got a story, too, that we're going to get into from a late season New Mexico archery elk hunt that I went on. Going to talk about hunting public land, dynamics with private land ownership, and some of the challenges that I've faced. So we'll get into all that. I promise it's going to be fun. It's going to be an entertaining episode, and no better person to tell their side of the story than my better half here. So anyways, babe, tell us a little bit about the elk hunt that we just went on and how it came about, some of our battles as new parents and deciding whether or not we should do this. Of course, we could go on and on about from November 14th when Livy was born up to this point, but we won't talk about new parenthood too much. Tell us about the hunt and how we got there and everything leading up to that.
Well, I remember you getting a text message on a Thursday morning from Braden, who guided us, a dear friend of yours, and I believe I was feeding Livy, and you stuck your phone kind of right in front of my face, and it said, "Bring Julia for a cow elk hunt. I had somebody cancel," something like that, and so we kind of pondered and took the morning to think about it, the pros and cons, and if it was even possible taking a 2-month-old to the mountains, especially on a hunt where you hop in the truck and you try and spot the elk and you jump out of the truck and you try and set up the tripod and the gun and everything to do with that. And so we talked to a few people, and everybody were like, do it. Create the memories. It's going to be maybe a little hard, maybe a little stressful, but create the memories while she's young and while you only have one kid.
Yeah. So with one day of notice, I mean, obviously you're trying to talk yourself out of it, thinking about, oh, this is going to be so hard. It's an 11-hour drive. It's this, it's that. And if it wasn't for a few of those people that you talked about saying, it's only going to get harder from here.
Right.
It's probably better that you just go and you soak in these moments and you create these memories, and she won't remember them, but we will, and we'll have the photos and things to look back on to tell her one day. So I don't know how many 2-month-olds get to go hunting with their parents in the mountains, but it was a pretty unique experience.
Well, and I think the drive probably would scare some people. 11-hour drive, you have to stop several times, you have to feed her, you have to change her. But we had experience when she was 4 weeks old, taking her to Wisconsin, and it wasn't too bad. And so that part didn't entirely scare me, just because we'd already done it one time. not too long ago. So
Yeah. So you're saying take the trip.
yeah, absolutely.
Take the trip.
Yeah.
Okay. So Braden reaches out, has this last minute hunt. We hem and haw about it. Even trying to talk ourselves out of it financially. Financially, it really didn't make any sense. When you look at the price of beef compared to what this cow elk hunt was going to cost us, we were trying to talk ourselves out of it, right?
Yeah.
But it's, as most of you know who are hunters, of course it's about harvesting the meat, but it's also about having your own organic meat. It's also about creating the memories. It's about more than just the dollar, right? And so with this being kind of a last second deal, we jumped on it. We get there, we show up. Obviously, anticipation's always high. You don't know what to expect when you're allowing someone else to kind of guide you around the mountains. And then especially when you have your 2-month-old with you for that. So
Literally with us in the truck.
yeah. So tell everybody what it was like just getting there, having to get the baby stuff ready, having to prepare for hauling our little Livy girl around the mountains with us in preparation for this hunt.
Well, I think I would have been more nervous if we didn't experience last year's hunt, if I didn't understand like how it was like driving through the mountains on the roads and stuff, and really how safe it really was for her. And you were in the back seat with her the whole time. So, but because it wasn't our first road trip, we kind of were able to gather the essentials: bottle warmer, milk, put it in the cooler in the back of the truck, just in case I was kind of stuck on the mountain and I couldn't come back and breastfeed, and a couple outfits in case she had a blowout, and her car seat, and we kind of made it happen. So
yeah, I'm always wondering, like I'm a terrible guided hunter, not because I heckle the guide, but because I always want to know and understand like what the game plan is. And I feel like for me personally, that was even more magnified having our daughter along for the ride, but knowing also that I was going to be the one in the back seat. I almost said stuck in the back seat, but I don't want it to sound bad. In the back seat with her, tending to her, caring for her as you guys are possibly out making a stalk on a cow elk. And there was one point where we spotted some elk. We parked the truck. Of course, for those of you who are elk hunters, you may understand this. For those of you who aren't, you may not. But hauling an elk out, whether it's a bull or a cow, is a lot of work. So we weren't hunting from the road per se, but if we could spot elk closer to the road rather than farther, that was obviously an added bonus, right?
Yeah.
So we're driving around these mountain roads and trying to find elk, and we spotted some, and y'all went and got after some elk. And I think that was your first real cardio since having a baby.
yes, not only cardio, but like Braden is 6'3" or 6'4" and has a longer stride than I do. So he was booking it, and I was trying to keep up with him. And going up a mountain, it absolutely was. I had to take a breath, and I was out of breath. My chest was hurting because it was kind of cold. We were in the snow at that point, and it was being 2.5 months postpartum. That was tough.
Yeah, I bet. And let me tell you, I'm sitting there in the truck while you're doing that. You're taking that hike, and everything's going good until it's not, right? Livy pooped her diaper. I'm changing her diaper. Meanwhile, I've got a battery-powered bottle warmer heating up some of your breast milk, and I'm in the backseat of the truck, and then Braden's hitting me up on the walkie-talkie saying, we can't find these elk. Can you back the truck up to see where they went? And I'm like, yeah, but you're going to have to give me a minute. I'm in the middle of changing a poopy diaper, heating up a bottle, and just trying to figure out what I'm going to do with her while I back the truck up. So, we're in the mountains, and some people may ridicule me for this, but I just kind of make this blanket cradle for her where she's snug in the back seat. I only had to back up, a couple 100 feet just to get a better view. And
not far at all.
And so I did that, and she's back there just kind of chilling, soaking it all in. And I told you guys I hadn't seen the elk, and so we eventually met back up. But we eventually found them again after we had all got together. So tell everyone what that was like when we spotted the elk and y'all having to get out and make a move, and then some of the troubles that you went through to start out that part of the hunt.
So like shortly after that hike, when we were running, he had me running. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm tracking with you. Yeah, we spotted them, and I had the rifle like right next to me, and he was like, jump out. So we jumped out, I grabbed the gun, and they kind of were running pretty close to us. And so
No, you're totally missing a whole part of the story.
I am?
Yeah.
Okay.
So first, I know it's a lot to remember.
Well, why don't you tell it then?
Okay, so we're all reunited, right? I've been playing Super Dad in the back seat, no big deal. You come back, you're winded and tired, no big deal. And we take off driving, and then I spot some elk, and there was a big group of them. It was like probably 50 of them, right?
Yeah.
And a little minor detail. And I'm not blaming Braden for this. So Braden, if you listen to this, I love you, brother. But they make this device called a kestrel, and you learned what a kestrel does. It takes into consideration the wind and the ballistics, and when you see an animal at a far distance in the mountains, there's a lot of things that affect that bullet flight. And this little device tells you how you need to adjust your scope to aim and whatnot. And so the kestrel, the battery was dead, and you guys got out and we're trying to get set up on one of these elk, and I got out because Livy was sleeping, and we weren't far from the truck. We were on this really backcountry mountain road, and so we get out, watching you try to make a play. And then what was it like trying to get settled in on the elk, trying to keep your cool? You're laying prone on your belly in the snow. What was that like?
So yeah, like you said, I was on my belly in the snow, and it was kind of cold, but it was, Braden had a bag that the rifle was sitting on so I could, get steady on the elk. And because the herd was kind of so big, I was on one, and then Braden was on another. So it took us a little bit to get on the same one. And I was pretty confident. Like, I remember last year being pretty shaky, and it took me a few deep breaths to actually get on the elk. And so this year I was less shaky, more confident. And because the wind was blowing so hard and we didn't have that device working, Braden told me to aim at a certain spot on the elk because of the wind. And so I did, and it felt really, really good. I felt like I aimed pretty well, but the wind was stronger than we thought. And so ended up going right a little bit farther than the vitals, and it skimmed a tree and scared off some, but they didn't go too far. And I felt really good about it. I was like, oh my gosh, did I hit it? And thankfully you guys videoed and kind of zoomed in and saw that it barely skimmed the tree. And so that was a big bummer.
Yeah. When you're the one watching, you're just like trying to pick out the elk, and we were all pretty much on the same page. And then the shot goes off, and you're like, what happened? Did she hit it? And then we look back at the video, and you can just see that bullet just barely graze this tree. And you're just like, oh man, but they didn't run off too far. So you guys run back and try to get repositioned to get another shot at them because they're still within view. And then that was a little trickier because it was like as soon as it looked like you were getting ready to be steady and to be aimed on one, they started like running kind of towards you, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think they maybe even split off into two groups. Like some were running kind of more down the mountain, and some were running more across. And so then we'd have to kind of run a few feet down the trail or the road and try and get another look on them. And eventually we just kind of lost them in the timber.
Yeah. And I'm running back and forth. I'm trying to be with you guys, but making sure the baby's okay. Okay,
Yeah.
baby's okay. I'm going to go
Yeah.
be with them. And then, she was a trooper, old Livy girl. She was a trooper the whole time. And you were good for letting me play dad and you go be the hunter.
Yeah.
And it all worked out good. So then that's when we get out of there. You don't get another shot. We find some more elk, maybe some of the same ones. I don't know. And then y'all hop out, try to make a move.
Mm-hmm. Never saw him.
Doesn't work out.
Yeah.
You don't see him. That's hunting, right? You sometimes all it takes is a split second, and if you're any longer than a split second, you might have missed your window of opportunity, right? So we head out the mountains. We've survived our first morning excursion with the baby. No elk yet, but it was a good experience. We went back. We were staying in a cabin, made a sandwich, hung out for a little bit, and then went out for the evening hunt. Mm-hmm. And that was to a spot that was nearby where Braden took us last year just to look at some bulls through the spotting scope and to hang out and pretty views and whatnot. And tell us about the story from there.
So we were driving, I think it was it even after we stopped and spotted?
We spotted some elk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we continued to drive, and Andrew was in the front seat at this point. I was in the back with Livy, and we were kind of on a curved road, and he was like, oh, bunch of elk. And so there was like a herd of maybe 40 just off the road, which is exactly what we wanted.
And just for the record, when we say just off the road, these are like mountain trails. For any of you who have hunted in the mountains, when we say road, we're not talking about like a busy 2-lane highway or anything like that. We're not like some hillbillies that just hop out the truck and are shooting off the road. But we're in the mountains, and sometimes we're farther from the truck than other times, and this was one of those times where the elk were in such a place where y'all were able to get out, make somewhat of a move on them, mm-hmm. and then you ultimately got a shot.
I did, yeah. We ended up continuing to drive instead of stopping the truck so they wouldn't get spooked. Continued to drive a little ways, and we stopped the truck. We got out, and Braden and I slowly tried to make a stalk on them. They ended up moving from that spot and kind of going into the mountains a little bit, and we ended up seeing a few. Now, you were probably like 150 feet by the truck where Livy was, and you were trying to wave us down there. Well, I couldn't really see that far. It was kind of getting a little bit dark. My contacts were no good. And so you were trying to wave us down there because you had a pretty good shot, several of them.
So neither of these two goons brought their phones with them, and we actually had service. So I'm looking around trying to call them, but I see both their phones are in the truck. And so I'm hanging out the window at this point because where we parked the truck was quite a ways away from where we saw the elk first, because we drove past them. We didn't want to scare them. We wanted to get out of sight. And then I'm looking, and they're going towards where the elk were. And meanwhile, all the elk are filtering past me while I'm sitting in the truck watching. Mm-hmm. And I'm entertaining Livy. And finally, I get you guys to look and acknowledge me, and I'm hanging out the window the elk are right there, the elk are right there, and I'm pointing, and so I see Braden motion to you come on, the elk are right over there. And so y'all run to get into a different position, and you ultimately get a shot at one.
I did, yeah.
And it was a little far back, but we didn't really know that at the time. Mm-hmm. Tell us what was going through your mind as still a relatively new hunter.
Yeah.
You killed an elk last year. You had a miss earlier that morning. What's going through your mind at this point?
I was kind of nervous because of the miss that morning, even though I still thought it was a good shot and everything. It still was a miss. And so the elk that I was aiming at was a little bit quartered away from us. And so I aimed the best I could and was steady on the tripod and let her fly. And then a lot of the elk kind of ran past. And I think at that point you backed the truck up, or you came and tried to see with us, tried to find the elk. And so you found her, and she was just kind of stunned, like just standing there kind of with her head down. And so we weren't really sure if that was the one I hit because we couldn't see the bullet or blood or anything. So we kind of just stayed on her for seemed like to be 45 minutes to an hour, or until it was dark. And eventually, I skipped a few points. I ended up having to put 2 more shots into her because she was so tough and still standing there.
So let me pause you, because
I'm not very good at telling those
you're
stories.
you're good at telling stories, but you're new to hunting, so you don't necessarily think about how your story's perceived by hunters and non-hunters alike.
Yeah.
So as you guys know, these creatures that we chase after and hunt, they're tough animals. I have far less experience elk hunting than I do whitetail hunting, but these animals are tough.
Yeah.
And you do everything you can to make a quick, clean, ethical kill. And sometimes it doesn't always go exactly the way you wrote it up, right? So you shot this elk. We identified that it was the elk that you hit. Mm-hmm. And the responsible thing to do is, if you can, try to put another shot into it, sometimes 2. Sometimes if the story gets crazier, it's more than that. But your goal is to obviously put that animal down as quick as possible with as little pain and suffering as possible. And so you took a couple more shots at her, both great shots. Mm-hmm. And
she wasn't angled the best to us. Like, her butt pretty much was to us at this point. So I had to.
Yeah. So, so she was quartered away from you pretty hard, and you were aiming for vitals, but it's a tough shot on the follow-up shot. You made a great follow-up shot. And the reality is, we just ran out of daylight watching her before she expired.
Right.
And so we felt like the proper thing to do was to wait until morning, knowing that she was going to be there in her bed. We, at this point, saw you make the shots, knew that she was going to expire, knew that it was better not to push her and possibly lose out on recovering that animal. Mm-hmm. And also, we had a goal of being able to get a picture with Livy. And so it kind of worked out where we weren't chasing after this animal in the dark. Mm-hmm. And hauling our baby around in the dark. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to come back the next morning and recover that animal very quickly. And while it was still cool, and so that we could get the meat out of there, I hiked Livy in there, and mm-hmm. we took pictures with her and got her right back out of there. And in fact, we got back to the truck, and you immediately started feeding her while Braden and I cut up the elk. But anyways, what was all of that like that morning? Talk about just that moment, the experience the night before, having our daughter with us when, we really almost talked ourselves out of even going on this trip. I mean, what was all of that like for you?
Well, after we got a couple good shots at her and kind of watching her bed down, I kind of just said a few prayers that she would expire and not suffer too long. And I was pretty confident in the shots that I made that she would expire, but just really praying that we would be able to recover her the next day, praying that any animals wouldn't get to her before we did. And so thankfully it was pretty cold that night. So she was good when we found her intact the next morning. But hiking in, it was about 150 yards into the mountains that Braden and I hiked in. And he had a pin on his phone approximately like where she was. And so, and you were kind of coaching us from the road because you could see us of where we think that she expired the night before. And so coming up on her, I was really grateful that we were able to recover her. And then you hiking with Livian and us getting pictures as a family of 3 with her was definitely memories we won't forget. So.
No doubt. And why, obviously, we're hunting cow elk for the meat. Why was this hunt particularly important or relevant due to the meat and being able to get that meat out of there cleanly and safely and into our freezer?
Why?
Yeah.
Because we're running out of meat.
So, for those of you who are contemplating a busy Valentine's Day or somewhere around there, when you have a baby in the fall, it can derail your hunting season a little
Yes.
bit, in a good way, of course.
Yeah.
But Daddy did not harvest any animals to put into the freezer. And I feel like maybe that's a good segue into Daddy had a late season archery bull tag in New Mexico prior to this hunt. It was right before Christmas. Mm-hmm. And so having a different deer season, with us bringing our first child into the world, trying to be present, trying to not spend as much time in a tree and more time with you and our daughter. This elk hunt was something that I've been really looking forward to all year long, all through your pregnancy, all through deer season back here in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. I didn't draw a Kansas tag, so I didn't get to go hunt up in Kansas this year. And so my hunting season was different, and I was really looking forward to this New Mexico late season archery bull hunt. And it's a really unique tag. And the reason for that is because not a lot of states offer a late season archery hunt. So the bulls aren't bugling, the rut's far long gone, the cows are in big groups, and the bulls are kind of bachelored up again and hunting together. And so anyway, before I get into the details of the hunt, I guess, do you have any comments as it relates to like life and family and, how having Livy impacted our hunting season together and, just anything that comes to mind?
Yeah. Leading up to having Livy, we tried to get in the deer stand a few times. I was 8 to 9 months pregnant when we did try, and that was definitely an experience, wearing your hunting clothes because I couldn't fit into mine. And I had a few tries at a few little bucks, and I whiffed, but that was still a really good experience. So
what have you learned about a clean archery miss?
That it's better to have a clean miss than injure them and not being able to recover them or have them suffer in the woods.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We always pray for a clean kill,
Yeah.
but if we miss, we pray for a clean miss. Yeah. And obviously nobody plans on missing, but it happens to the best of us. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. And then having Livy was almost the start of duck season, which that was like one of our first hunts together when we started dating was the beginning of duck season. So really good memories. And I definitely missed going duck hunting this year. You only got to go, I think, once or twice as well, because we had her just right in the middle of hunting season. So
yeah.
What was your initial question?
Well, just what the feelings were with just having a new baby right in the heart of a time where we're used to spending a lot of time in the outdoors together. And then you watched me prepare and train all year long for this elk hunt. And so you knew how important it was to me.
Yeah.
And it was the days right before Christmas. And so we had plans to go down to Texas where my parents live. Y'all were going to hang out with my parents. I was going to go to New Mexico, and I was going to do my hunt and then try to make it back for Christmas to spend with you guys at my parents' house. And the hunt was just, the whole thing was a crazy experience, and it taught me a lot. And of course, you only know some of this stuff and can picture some of this stuff from me telling the story, right? But while I tell the story, I want you to interrupt me if you have thoughts about anything I've told you or about anything I'm talking about right now. So I go on this hunt, and it's something that I've been looking forward to all year long, especially given what we just talked about regarding how this year's fall looked pretty different for us. And so brother Matt made the trip with me, and he was tagging along, and we were hunting with Braden again. Shout out to Collis Guide Service. That's his business out there in New Mexico, his outfitting business. But anyways, we were going out to hunt with him, and you don't know what to expect. Again, I'm like, what are we doing? Where are we going? What's the plan? Have you seen elk? And you just have to kind of embrace it and soak it in. And so what I told myself was, I'm going to have zero expectations. This is just some time in the mountains to enjoy myself and to soak in God's creation. And if I get an animal, man, that would be the cherry on top, you know?
Yeah.
Which was cool for the first 2 days.
Yeah.
And
because your hunt started, you drove down the 20th, right? It started the 21st.
Yes. So let me look at my calendar really quick.
Or it was.
Because we drove down on the 26th, which was a Thursday, I believe.
26th.
I'm sorry, not the 26th.
The 19th.
The 19th. And then the season started on the 21st.
On that Saturday.
Mm-hmm. So we got into New Mexico. We got into camp on Friday. And so you only have 2 or 3 days of hunting there before, if you want to be with your family for Christmas,
right,
you got to get something done, right? So 21st goes by, and tough hunting for me. We didn't really get a chance at anything, hadn't seen anything. 22nd goes by, didn't really see much, didn't get a chance at anything. And what's unique about this tag is for it to be a legal bull, it has to have 6 points on one side. So you could see the most beautiful 5x5 in the state of New Mexico, and you'd have to pass on it because it has to have 6 points for this tag on one side. And so meanwhile, Braden had several other people in camp, and there were several other guides working for these people, and they were getting opportunities, you know, and which is just how it goes sometimes. But you start to be like, all right, what's going on here? You know, you let that doubt creep in. Meanwhile, you know, I know that he knows what he's doing. It wasn't working out for us those first couple days, which that's hunting. That's just how it goes. Yeah. So then the next day is the 23rd, and he has plans to hike us into this country, this wilderness, and have it be pretty much an all-day ordeal. And I didn't know really what to expect. I was not in the best shape. When you talk about having a baby and you talk about dad bods, I mean, it's a real thing, right? So I was in much better shape before the baby came, and I kind of let that slip a little bit. So when I got to camp, I said, Braden, hey man, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is I'm dialed in with my bow. I've been shooting all year long. Like, I'm ready. The bad news is I'm not in the physical shape that I'd hoped to be in for this hunt, you know? Yeah. And so what's funny is Braden and I got in a little spat the night before this day 3 hunt over his rifle. And he had been interested in selling his rifle, and I told him I wanted to buy it earlier in the year, but I thought he was too high on the price. And that rifle had sentimental value to us because that was the rifle that you and I both killed our first elk with last year, the year prior. Yeah. And so we got into a little argument over the cost of the rifle, and he was going to sell it to this other guy for less than he was going to sell it to me. And I was like, what the heck, man? And it was mostly lighthearted, but tensions were kind of high because we weren't in elk. Yeah. And of course, he's doing his job, and he wants to give me opportunities. And so anyways, the next morning before that hunt, he knew all along what he was about to put me through physically. And he got me back for the little feud over the rifle, which I ended up buying the rifle from him.
Yeah.
And I brought it home with me, and I gifted it to you for a Christmas present. And so now we have that rifle in our family, which is cool. But
Yeah.
so we go hiking into this place, and I don't know what to expect other than he said, this is probably going to be an all-day ordeal. Bring plenty of water and bring plenty of snacks. And I'm thinking, okay, like, how bad could this be? Because we hadn't done anything too crazy strenuous the first couple of days.
Right.
And we hike in there, and what we're doing is we're working from south to north, and we're checking these north-facing hillsides on our way in. So we're coming past them, looping around, looking back into them, seeing if there's elk, because they like to bed up on the shady north hillsides or north-facing hillsides in the morning after they get off their feet. And so we're walking, and we're glassing, and we're walking, and we're glassing, and we're walking, and we're glassing. And, you know, we're probably, I don't know, 7 miles into this hike at this point, and like, it's pretty rugged country where we're at. I mean, it's very rocky. Parts of it are very steep. We're kind of up, down. And even Matt said, like, dude, this has been worse than like hunting in Alaska was for me.
And Matt's in shape.
Yeah, and Matt's in shape. And I'm like, dang, bro, imagine how I feel right now, you know? And so we get back, and I'm kind of talking to Braden. I'm like, man, like, where are we trying to get to? I know you've been back here before. Like, do you have a destination in mind? And he's like, man, you know, the back of this, obviously it's pretty far in here. It's usually pretty good. There's some private in the area. The elk bounce back and forth between those ranches. And, you know, we're just going to get back here and see what we see. And if we don't see anything, we'll make the long hike out of here and see if we can get on something before the evening hunt. And so I think we're literally like 7 miles in at this point, and we've seen one cow group and a bachelor group of like 3 spike bulls. And I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Number one, I'm dying. Number two, this just doesn't seem like it's it, you know?
Yeah.
And so we get to the back of this place, and we're 8 miles in at this point, and we're pretty much to the end of what we can hunt on the public. And we're glassing, and we spot some bulls, most of which are on private, couple baby bulls on the public, and all at once, all the elk start getting up and changing their beds. When that morning sun starts to shift, they get up, they feed a little bit, and then they bed back down in some shade so that they can stay cool. Because of temperature fluctuations there, it'll be, 30 degrees in the morning, but may get up to 60, 65 midday. So about the time all those elk are getting on their feet, I'm like, hey, should we work a little farther down into this public to where we get a really good view back into stuff that we can hunt? Because this is cool and all seeing these elk, but we can't do anything about those.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, that's absolutely what we should do. And so we move a little farther, and now we're glassing back, and he spots a small bull, little raghorn, and that's the only elk we see on public. And we're sitting there, and we're glassing, and just can't turn anything else up. I'm like, well, about that time? He's like, yeah, it's about that time. And I'm thinking, here we go, another 8 miles out. Well, turns out it was like 10 miles after we mapped it all out. So he's like, all right, just let me eat this sandwich, and then we're going to go. You guys keep glassing and see if you see anything else. Mm-hmm. And then probably not even 2 minutes later, Matt goes, there's another bull with that small bull. And I'm like, no kidding. So I throw my binos up, and I'm looking, I'm like, that's a pretty good bull. And Braden stops eating his sandwich, and he's looking through the spotting scope. He's like, yeah, that is a good bull. And it's on public, And so,
do you know what the range was at that point? Like how far you were?
Oh man, we were over 1,000 yards away from them. We were pretty far. And so Well, I'll tell you how far it was. I got after them while they were kind of on their feet and grazing and changing beds. I was trying to make tracks while they were still in the same place.
Yeah.
And it was a mile walk back to get to the top of the mountain above them where I could start to descend down the mountain and make a stalk on them. And so I'm kind of going in blind at this point. And I knew from looking over there that the top of the mountain had more cover, more trees than the bottom half of the mountain. And so I'm just a Midwestern white-tailed deer hunter for the most part. And shout out to my boy Doug, because he's taught me the little I know about stalking animals, stalking big game. And so I start off on this thing, and I'm not overly confident myself, if I'm being honest. And I am just slowly working down the mountain, hoping I'm in the right position. Braden and Matt hung back, and they were trying to watch me to kind of steer me in to be within range of these animals. And so I actually had cell phone service where we were at, and so we were texting back and forth, or I'd hop on the phone real quick and say, okay, can you tell what they're doing?
Yeah.
And so I'm easing down the mountain, going from rock to rock, trying not to kick a rock down the mountain, trying not to break any sticks, trying not to trip and fall, trying not to drop my binos out of my harness, things like that. And I can remember as I'm easing down the mountain, I'm looking at my phone and I'm like, okay, here's where they were. I had a pin dropped. I've got to be getting close. And I'm behind this tree and I see a big rock out to my right. And I kind of make like a big stretching step for that rock with all my momentum. Because if I can go from big rock to big rock, I don't have to worry about making a bunch of noise, kicking little rocks or losing my footing. And so I all at once go for this rock, and my momentum carries me out from behind the tree, and boom, there's both elk. And there's nothing in between me and them.
So what was your yardage at this point?
At that point, I was, I think, about 130 yards or so, 135-ish.
Yeah.
And I'm in the wide open. I mean, there's maybe like a couple little shrubs between us. And I'm like, what do I do now? They're on their feet still at this point. And I actually thought the little bull saw me. The big bull wasn't looking, but he must not have seen me. I might have just been paranoid. So anyway, I start looking around for what my next play is, and I see a tree that's about 30 yards away from me. And I'm like, okay, if I could just get to that tree, that'd put me within 100 yards. I practiced all season religiously out to 100. I would prefer not to have to make a shot at 100 yards, but at least if I felt perfect and the conditions were right, I could think about it at that point, So I'm thinking about my move to get to this tree with not much in between us and kind of hoping the elk will mosey off and go behind something. And the little bull did just that, and I lost sight of him. And all at once, that big bull that I'm after, he lays down and he's facing me, head looking right in my direction. And I'm like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way I can do anything to get any closer to this elk without him seeing me.
Right.
And so I'm just frozen. And then he starts kind of scratching his back. And I'm like, that's when I'm going to have to do it. Like, it just hit me, I'm like, that's when I'm going to have to try to close distance. And so the big rocks are getting slimmer. The sticks and stuff like that are slimmer too. But, every now and then you're looking for a step and you're chancing that twig or you're chancing that rock. And because now I'm within earshot of them, any mess up that I have, they're going to hear me. And if I happen to be moving while he stops scratching his back and looks back at me, he's definitely going to see me. And so, I mean, Matt's telling me they're watching this go down. And this whole closure of about 30 yards took probably 2 hours, maybe longer.
Yeah.
I've got my bow in my hand, I'm like crab walking where I can. I'm crouched down.
Do you
when
have your
I can
backpack
be.
at this point,
No,
too?
I bailed,
Okay.
or I dropped my backpack off. All I've got is my bino harness with my binos, my rangefinder, my bow, and my release. And I am just trying to close distance. And so some time would go by, and he'd scratch his back again, and I might close a few more yards.
Yeah.
If I was lucky. And he'd look back again. And this whole thing goes on. And I'm like almost to the tree, right? Trying to close 30 yards in 2 hours. And then I go to commit to the tree while the big bull's looking away. And right as I move, the little bull pops back into my view. Like wherever he bedded down behind the stuff, behind the juniper trees, now all of a sudden he's looking right through my soul, it felt like. But I can only see half of his face. I can only see one eyeball.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, just be calm. Don't move. I'm frozen. I'm absolutely frozen. It was a stare down for probably only 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity.
5 minutes is still long.
Yeah, 5 minutes was long. Like I'm halfway crouched. I'm not moving. I'm trying not to shake my bow so my shiny broadhead doesn't flash.
Yeah.
And he finally turns and looks away, and I commit myself the rest of the way to the tree. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I made it. And I'm in the shadows of the trees where I can see the big bull. The little bull can't see me because I'm on the other side of the tree. And I figured if he's like a whitetail and he gets curious, or he thought maybe something was up, maybe he'll get up and kind of walk past me. Mm-hmm. And if I'm on this side of the tree, he won't be able to see me. So I'm ranging the big bull. He's still bedded down, not a care in the world at this point. He's at 103 yards. And I'm like, whew, I've practiced out to 100 all year long, and he looks way further than that. And then it hits me. I'm like, well, he is straight down the mountain. And so my rangefinder is spitting out the yardage. It's accounting for the angle and the distance.
Oh, okay.
And so what my rangefinder is calling 103 yards is probably really like 130, maybe 140.
Yeah.
And now my confidence is diminishing, right? Like that's just too far to take a shot at an animal in the wind, on the side of the mountain, in the rocks. You know, I just felt like it was too far. I was going to have to do something else at that point. Well, Braden texts me and says, that small bull just walked right past you, had to have been 30 yards away. And I'm thinking, okay, perfect. Like these guys are buddies right now this time of year. Mm-hmm. He's got to come walking by me.
Yeah.
And he stays bedded down for, I don't know, several minutes longer, maybe 10 to 15 minutes longer. And he finally gets up. And I'm like, okay, it's game time, you know? And he gets up, stands there for a second, scratching himself, and then comes up to this tree and starts raking on it. And I'm like, okay, I don't want him to be able to skirt me like that little bull probably did, because where I was at, the mountain had some curvature. And if you can think of like the top of it, I was down off of one side of the face. And then I assumed that other bull skirted by me on the other side of that face, where probably all I could have seen was the top of his back and his head and his antlers. And so while that bull's raking a tree, I'm moving perpendicular across the mountain to where I think I'll intercept him at to try to close distance.
Yeah.
And I get there and I see the bull and he starts coming. And I'm like, okay. But I'm like in the wide open. He's got to walk through some trees. I'm ranging trees, 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards. I'm trying to guess where he's going to come out at. And then he comes through the trees. I decide I have enough time to throw a quick range on him, range him. He's like 35 yards, but still closing distance. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, he's going to be roughly 30. So I throw my pin to 30 yards. He comes and he stops and he looks right at me. And I'm not drawn back yet at this point. And he looks away from me and I draw back. And I don't know if he could sense it, if he could hear my arrow in my rest, whatever. But then he looks back at me again, and I'm at full draw, and I'm actually calm and collected, and the stalk was way harder than the execution of the shot.
Yeah.
And I remember aiming, and I was pointed towards like his center mass, and his shoulder was covered up by some brush, and then his vitals had just a little bit of brush here and there. And I was like, okay, come off of the center mass. I think I can thread this arrow right through and right into the vitals. And so I let the shot rip, and it just whacks him. Mm-hmm. And this bull spins around, and he hauls down the mountain, has to cover 150 yards. This is not an exaggeration, in like 4 to 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, he just moved so quickly. But the whole time he's running through juniper trees. He's hurt.
He's just barreling
I
through
felt good about the shot. It sounded good. He's barreling through stuff, and I even thought I heard him crash. Mm-hmm. And these guys are calling me. They're like, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing!" And Matt's like, "It looked like it was something off the Outdoor Channel. Like, there you are, standing in the mountains, full draw, and this big giant elk is just right there." And then, so we start tracking it, and actually, Braden had spotted a elk shed right next to where these elk were bedded. And so I go down, I grab that, I hike back up the mountain that I just climbed down to meet them. Then we hike back down, and we get on what's an awesome blood trail. Track this elk. We're just going, great blood. And then Braden's got his phone out, and he says, "We're at the edge of the public." And I'm like, "Oh, you're kidding me." And I didn't even think about where the elk ran to, or, I just was so excited. I made a good shot, and we found a little part of my arrow, which tells me I probably hit the offside shoulder, and it broke off, and so I'm like, gosh, dang it. And I said, well, I guess we back out and try to get a hold of the owner, and this owner, he had a reputation for having some run-ins with hunters and guides and stuff in the past. I don't know to what extent. I just heard that, and so I'm thinking, man, I don't know if this is looking good. And so we hike all the way back out that night, the 8 to 10 miles. We were back there. Sleepless night, of course, waiting on this, and I try to get in contact with the landowner the next morning, and I'll make a long story short. Some friends of mine, they're in the oil and gas business, and it turns out this landowner, he has a business in the same industry, and I thought maybe they know each other. So I got the contact information from this guy. Turns out he knew him. Yeah. Well, this guy, the landowner, I get in contact with him. I call him. He doesn't answer. I leave a voicemail. Doesn't get back to me. So I decide, I'll text him. Maybe he's a texter. Yeah. I text him, and tell him who I am, tell him the situation, tell him what happened. I sent him videos of the blood trail. I said, we got good blood up to your property line. And keep in mind, this gentleman, he doesn't have any fencing. He doesn't have any signs, no posted signs saying no trespassing. If it was not for the app Onyx Hunt, we would not have known that we were right at the border of public and private. Right. But we tried to do the right thing anyway, right? Like, we didn't want to trespass. We felt like it was right. And so he texts me back right away, and he's like, where did you shoot it? Where did it cross my fence? Were you hunting with an outfitter? Like, just really to the point questions. And at the time, I'm still excited. Like, okay, this guy's going to help. Like, because he told my friends that he was going to help me. Yeah. And we were going to be able to go in and get it, or something to that effect. It seemed as if he was interested in helping me. Mm-hmm. And he says, okay. And I literally dropped him pins to where I shot it, where it crossed the fence, where the blood trail was, and where I thought it crashed at, et cetera. And he said, okay, I'm going to meet my ranch manager, and I'll let you know. And I'm like,
that's it.
You'll let me know? Yeah. What does you'll let me know mean? But I'm trying not to
And
pressure.
at this point, it's now Christmas Eve.
Yes, it's Christmas Eve. Been trying to get a hold of this guy. Been trying to come up with a game plan. This is probably happening at 11 a.m. or so. The meat is probably, unless the elk died in the shade, questionably spoiled already. You know, so I'm upset about that. But we go to text this guy, and he says, "I'll let you know." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I'm waiting. And like I said, that was probably at like 11 a.m. And then I follow back up with him, and it's about 4:30 on Christmas Eve. And I'm like, "Hey there," I'll call him Mr. Rancher. "Hey there, Mr. Rancher. I know it's getting late. It's Christmas Eve. Just wondering if, I could meet up with you, come get my bull." And I'd already offered to come help him, come show him where the shot was.
You were very respectable.
Tried
you did
my
all
best.
the right things.
And that's where he said, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Dude ghosted me. And you talk about a sick feeling, like a sick to your stomach feeling, because I'm a landowner too. And I know many of you listening are, and I can't say exactly what I would do in this gentleman's scenario, but I could confidently say that if someone shot their first archery bull elk 10 miles into some public ground on Christmas of all holidays, or right to it, the holiday season of giving and being kind and being loving and celebrating the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, like if there was ever a time to let me go get my bull, I felt like it was maybe going to be then.
Yeah.
And I never heard back from him. I came to the conclusion that he was kind of playing me. I don't want to assume things. I don't know his stance. But he texted me to find out what he needed to know to find my bull, or to have his ranch manager find my bull. And he ghosted me after that. So Matt and I hop in the truck knowing that if this gentleman had any intention of getting back in touch with me, he would have done it already. And we make the long overnight drive on Christmas Eve back to Texas to be with you and our daughter for her first Christmas, which was great. But of course, I'm crushed because I don't have the bull that I worked really, really hard for. I prepared all year long, went on this 10-mile hike, almost 20 miles round trip to get out of there. And, I had nothing to show for it. And because I hadn't deer hunted hardly at all this fall, like that was going to be our family's meat, like that we were going to use. And it was just really disheartening. And I reached back out to him. I sent him a letter, and nothing. Still crickets. And so I'm probably not getting my bull back. I haven't lost all hope. Maybe by the grace of God, he'll hear this.
You did end up bringing 2 sheds, right?
Yes.
2 sheds from that hunt.
Yeah, we brought 2 sheds home, and then one that I spotted on that archery hunt that we didn't have time to go get. I saw it through the spotting scope really far away. And then when you had shot your cow elk on this most recent hunt, the next day we hiked out and went and got that shed. So I did come away with 3 elk sheds, shed antlers. So that was cool. But it taught me a valuable lesson because, for many of us, these animals we spend our whole lives chasing and catering to. If you're like me and you love hunting, that somewhat can consume you. And I feel like maybe the Lord was trying to teach me that although he gave us these animals for our consumption and our enjoyment, at the end of the day, they're still worldly things.
Yeah.
Recovering an elk rack, that's still a worldly thing. And I feel like maybe God was trying to teach me that at the end of the day, he gives and he takes. And he gave me those special moments and those special memories that are etched in my brain. But he took that from me to maybe teach me something greater and to make me pause and reflect and to to think about being a better human being, even though I really wanted to be angry and frustrated and to, if I'm being honest, just tell this story to the world and, talk about how I was done wrong. Like, you make it about you, and that's not what life's about. You can't make things about you. And, I hope someday there's a chance I'll still recover that thing, but I'm also at peace with not, and because God gives and he takes away. And at the end of the day, I was able to spend Christmas Day with you and Livy and my parents and Matt, and have some really great memories to hang on to. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I know I talked for a long time trying to tell the story of the hunt, but what do you think?
I know we had like this deal when you went on this hunt, like if you were going to FaceTime me or call me like sometime during the day, like I knew that was the moment that you got a bull. And I remember sitting in your dad's recliner, and my friend Emily was over, and I was telling her about the hunt as you were calling, and my phone lit up, and it was you. And it was like 5:30 or so, 5 o'clock. And I was shouting to your parents. I was like, it's Andrew. And so I answered, and you were like, babe, I just got a really big bull. Or I can't remember what you said, but you had a good shot on him, blah, blah, blah. But it had just happened, and you were going to go meet up with Braden and Matt after that. And so we were all so excited. But it wasn't over yet. Of course, you had to recover the bull, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And so we were all being really patient and stuff, and just kind of waiting around and praying that following the blood trail, you would be able to find it. And for me, it was just so frustrating seeing all the hard work that you put in the whole year. And I mean, I was pregnant this entire year, and I remember just going out, like we would go to 60 yards and 80 yards and 100 yards. And I would just watch you, do rep after rep with your bow. And, sometimes your shoulder was hurting and you'd push through. And so it was just really frustrating at the end of that to see you work so hard for something that you wanted so bad, and then it be in the hands of this other person.
Yeah.
And for him to not have the respect to text you back or even say like, yeah, I'm going to keep it. It's on my property. Just something, just some response.
Yeah. And because my understanding now, knowing this of the law in New Mexico, is that because we did try to call Game and Fish, they didn't answer. It was Christmas Eve when we called them. Nobody ever got back in touch with us, which is really unfortunate because our wildlife resources, our conservation departments are oftentimes shortchanged from state funding or, not enough resources. And, I thought to myself originally, had someone got back in touch with me, maybe this would have been a different story. However, I'm told that in New Mexico, the landowner has the final say in whether or not they choose to allow you onto their property to recover the animal, even if a Game and Fish officer is with you. And so it was frustrating because you feel helpless. But I also, through all my frustration, I've tried to give the landowner grace because I'd heard that he's had several different run-ins with trespassers or poachers in the past. And I don't blame him for being jaded if that's true. To him, I was probably just another guy.
Yeah.
I was probably just another guy pushing up on his property lines, and, in his mind, he wasn't going to stand for that. And I tried to do everything right. And what's even wilder is 9 out of 10 people that I told this story to after the hunt, they said, oh, I would have just got the elk.
Right.
Everybody said that. And I don't question what we did for one moment. We did the right thing, and I can lay my head on the pillow at night knowing that. But for those of you choosing whether or not to do the right thing, maybe you get away with it, but maybe it hurts the next guy.
Yeah.
Like in this case, me being the next guy, right? So I think having enough respect as a public land hunter, or even as somebody who's hunting private, have respect for your neighbors, have respect for farmers and ranchers, do the right thing, make the call, be honest, talk about what happened, and maybe my story will be different next time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time here, so I wanted to ask you one question in particular. What would you say to folks who, of course, we're new parents, so we're not talking to the people with 2 and 3 or more kids who have more experience than us, but what would you say to the folks who are contemplating like just taking the trip or doing the thing or dragging their baby into the mountains? Like, what do you say?
You might not have an opportunity presented again like that. For us, it won't be until next season, and she'll be over 1, and who knows what that time will bring. And so you're never going to get those memories or times back. And so take the trip, make the memories, take the photos so that you have memories years to come. And we plan on, teaching her how to hunt when she's able to, and she'll be able to reflect on like, oh, I went on my first hunt when I was 2 months old, and so I don't regret going on that hunt one bit. Even if we weren't able to harvest a cow elk, it was still an amazing experience, and kind of, I think, boosted our confidence as parents. Like, oh, okay, we can do this. Like, we can take a road trip. We can go do this. Like, she can sleep in a pack and play. Like,
Yeah.
So we just kind of went with the flow, and you were definitely the calm to my storm. I was a little bit anxious about it. Just didn't know how she would be, but she loves being in the car and loves being on the move. So
yeah,
take the trip and make the memories.
All right, one last question. If by the grace of God, Mr. Rancher, as I called him earlier, has the opportunity to hear this podcast, what would you say to him?
I would say, what would Jesus do? This is a hardworking man who did all of the right things by the book. And what would you do if it was your son? If your son, shot an elk and crossed into private, you did all the right things, and that's all you can do. But give us back our rack.
Well, like I said, at the end of the day, it's a worldly possession, and I wasn't asking for you to compliment me in any way, but I hear all sorts of mixed responses as to what people have to say when I tell that story and what their reaction is, and so maybe he'll hear this and maybe he'll find it in his heart to give it back, but if not, life goes on. We go on, and hopefully there's other elk in the future,
Absolutely.
So, and in closing, if you're an outdoorsman, do the right thing, follow the law, be honorable towards other landowners and property lines, and be honorable towards other hunters who you may encounter, and just do the right thing.
Yeah.
Be a good human, and good things will come back to you. And that's all I have to say about that.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This is the Tide to the Land podcast. Again, my name's Andrew Schultz. This is my wife, Julia. You've heard all about our elk hunting excursions and adventures, and we appreciate you guys listening. We'll see you next time.